Very good afternoon to all my dear students. So I hope you all are studying and taking full advantage of these sessions. So in our last two sessions, we have revised chapter number 1. And I hope the questions and notes that I have already uploaded, you all have gone through that. Still, in case you have any doubt or query, you can always send in your query in the chat box, right? So today we will be starting with chapter number 2, which is audit strategy, audit planning, and audit program, right? So let me just share the screen with you. So audit strategy, audit planning, and audit program, right? So in this chapter, we will be discussing about and we will be revising all three concepts relating to audit strategy, audit planning, and audit program. First, let us start with audit planning. Quickly tell me, what do you understand by the term plan? Plan or planning? Quickly send in your replies. And as I always say, my endeavor will be to make you understand and also help you in learning this concept after understanding, right? So quickly send in your replies. I'm waiting for your replies. Plan or planning. What is meant by that? So students, please send in your replies on my ID whereby I have entered with small name, like not in capitals. Or send in your reply as answer to everyone. Okay. So see, why is planning important in audit? So planning is important. Let's say take example of your exams. So when you are preparing for your exams, planning is definitely required. You need to plan as to what time you are going to devote to what subject, how many times you are going to revise. Then only you will be able to achieve the result in an effective manner. Now, what is meant by effective? So, what is meant by effective manner? Effective manner means that the end result is achieved. And what is meant by efficient? It means that the end result is achieved with minimum wastage of resources or time. That is with minimum cost, right? So planning is important for our audit so that the audit can be completed in an effective manner, efficient manner on a timely basis. So what is meant by effective manner? I told you that the end result should be received. So what is the end result? Why audit is conducted, or what is the end result of the output process? Quickly send in your replies.
Ma'am, we are getting unable to send queries on your small letter name.
Okay. So, IT, is it possible that you enable the students to send the queries on my second ID, because I have logged in with that ID on the separate device? Or students, if it's possible, then send it to everyone.
Ma'am, we are getting also unable to send it to everyone.
Okay, no problem. So I can see that Swati is saying that the end result is audit report. And Bhumika is also saying the same thing, right? So absolutely correct that the auditor needs to plan so that he can complete his audit in an effective manner. That is, he can give his audit opinion, right? Efficient manner is what? That with the minimum resources. What are the resources for an auditor? The time and the team, right? And on a timely basis, right? So let us just have a look at very simple topic, which is why planning is required in audit. So you have been doing this planning topic since your 11th or 12th, right? In your business studies. So you all know why planning is required. So audit is no exception. Audit also needs planning. So what are the benefits? See, if you plan in advance, suppose you are going to conduct the audit of ABC Limited and you have already planned. Now, what benefits will come? First of all, when the team has already planned, then appropriate attention can be devoted to important areas. Why? Because while planning, all the important areas must have been discussed within the team, right? Any potential problem, potential is what? Likely potential which may happen in future, it can be identified and the same can be resolved. Let's take an example. For example, when the auditor is planning, he came to know that, let's say, the sales department of the company, the person who will be providing the information, he'll be on a leave for, let's say, 1 week when the auditor is going there. So he have identified that, okay, at that time, information from sales department cannot be taken. The same can be resolved. Why? He may not keep the checking of sales department at that particular week, right? Then planning helps in organizing and managing the audit engagement in an effective and efficient manner. What is effective and what is efficient, I've already told you. Selection of engagement team members according to the capabilities and competence. For example, let's say a company XYZ is there and it has foreign subsidiaries. Now the engagement team members, let's say it consists of 5 article assistants. The person who has worked in case of imports and export or in case of foreign subsidiaries, he must be having the competence of dealing with such kind of audit work. So he can be selected for such assignment accordingly, right? Then the direction, supervision of the team and the review of the work that has been done. See, planning has been done that, okay, in this month or in this week, let's say sales transactions will be checked by so and so person. Now, it can also be discussed that who will be reviewing that work and when that work will be reviewed, right? Now, in case, let's consider a situation that it is a manufacturing company. The firm is conducting the audit of a manufacturing company and the company is manufacturing technical cranes, right? Now, the valuation of such cranes require the involvement of experts, right? Because valuation of cranes is outside the scope of audit. If you remember, it fall outside the domain of the competence of the auditor. So if any experts, or let's say if it is a joint audit and other auditor work is also, other auditors are also there. So coordination of that work becomes easier. Why? Because planning has been done much in advance. And if planning is done with all these benefits, then you all know that audit risk can be reduced to an acceptable low level. What is audit risk? That the auditor may give an inappropriate opinion. So it will be reduced to an acceptable low level. You all know that audit risk cannot be reduced to 0. What is the reason? Quickly tell me. Quickly send in your replies. What is the reason why audit risk cannot be reduced to 0? Yes, Anmol is saying, ma'am, because of inherent limitations of audit, which is absolutely correct. So students, we are on chapter number 2. It does not mean that you will not or you will forget chapter number 1. Right? I told you in the very first session also that before coming for the next session, you need to revise the chapter which we have already covered. Ayushi is also saying inherent limitation, which is absolutely correct. Om Krishnan is saying reasonable assurance, not absolute. Yes, but what is the reason? It is due to inherent limitations of audit. So a quick look at why planning and audit is necessary, because appropriate attention can be given to the important areas. so as to identify and resolve the potential problems. What is potential? Likely, which may happen in future. It helps in organizing and managing the audit in an effective and efficient manner. Selection of the team members according to their competence and capabilities. Direction and supervision of the team and review of the work, and coordination with other auditors and experts. I hope this is clear. So this was with respect to planning, importance of planning in audit. Now, another important topic with respect to audit planning is that you may get a question that audit planning is a continuous and iterative process, and it is not a discrete phase of audit. Now I'll be asking you 3 questions. I need your quick replies. Quickly tell me what is meant by discrete. Quickly, I need answers. Discrete. Separate. Absolutely correct. What is meant by iterative? Repetitive. That is which you have to do again and again. Right? And another word used for continuous is continual also in your book, right? So it says that audit planning is not a discrete phase of audit. That is, it will not happen that when the audit team is conducting the audit, it will do the planning and then the planning phase is over. No. It is a continuous and iterative process. That is, it is to be done again and again, continuously throughout the process of audit. Let's take a very simple example. Suppose the auditor has planned that he will be checking the sales transactions on sample basis. Now, when the same was being checked, he found that there are number of misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. Now, will this have an impact on his earlier planning, whereby he planned that the sales transaction will be checked on a sample basis? Obviously, yes. So what will auditor do? He will change the plan and he'll make another plan. So the planning processes was iterative, to be done again and again and continuously throughout the process of audit. It is not a discrete phase of audit, means that it cannot happen that auditor has done planning. Now he will not do any planning. Planning is done and it is separate from audit. No, that is not possible. Is it clear? Right? So it says that planning is not a discrete phase of an audit, but rather a continual is continuous, and iterative is happening again and again, repetitive process that often begins shortly after or in connection with the completion of previous audit and continues until the completion of the current audit. Let's just take an example. See, suppose there is some Holi party or Diwali party, right? Now, what happens is once that Diwali party gets over, what will you say? Next time we are going to do like this, right? So your planning starts immediately after the conclusion of the previous Diwali party and it continues till your next year Diwali party. So now just read this again. Planning, it often begins shortly after or in connection with the completeness of the previous audit and continues until the completion of the current audit. It often happens now, you say, okay, next time we will do like this. Next time we'll keep this in mind. So it begins for the next year. You are starting your planning from the end of the, you can say last year Diwali party, or you can say with respect to audit, the previous auditing audit. Completion of the previous audit, and it continues till the completion of the current audit. Then here also you will start planning for the next year audit, right? So let us read this point again. Planning is not a discrete separate phase of audit, but rather a continuous and iterative happening again and again process that often begins shortly after or in connection with the completion of previous audit and continues until the completion of the current audit. Is it clear? Is it clear? And in fact, students, before the auditor is planning. There are certain procedures that the auditor needs to perform. See, you all, since these are revisionary classes, I am expecting that you all are aware about risk assessment procedures. Though these are discussed in detail in your chapter number 3, quickly send in your replies. Risk assessment procedures as per SA 315. Quickly, I need answers. I hope you all are aware. So Ayushi is saying yes. Yes, Anmol is also saying, Om Krishna Om is also saying. So, right. So, in before there are certain matters that the auditor needs to consider even before the auditor's performance of various risk assessment procedure as per SA 315. So, what are those? Those are what? Those are part of planning only. So, what analytical procedures can be performed as risk assessment procedure? For example, the auditor may consider it necessary that, okay, let me just calculate the GP ratio of this year and compare it with the previous year or compare it with the industry trend, so that he can have a general idea, an overall idea about how the company is working, the general understanding about the legal and regulatory framework of the company. So let's say if it is a bank, so what are the RBI regulations that are applicable, right? Materiality levels. So what transactions are material, right? For example, let's say while going through the previous year audit report, the auditor found that, okay, the company is having a number of related party transaction. So this is again a significant risk area. So materiality, whether experts are to be involved or not, right? So I gave you example of cranes, technical cranes for which the valuation is required. So maybe experts are required, and what other risk assessment procedures the auditor can perform. So how is this topic given in your module? It says that there are certain matters that are to be considered prior to auditor's identification and assessment of risk of material misstatement. So prior to performing risk assessment procedure as per 315, auditor may consider various matters. See, before considering, before performing the risk assessment procedures, auditor will decide as to what procedures to perform. So these are the 2 points. What procedures to perform. So whether analytical procedures, whether what other procedures are to be performed, that he will obtain what general understanding about the industry, the materiality levels, and the expert. Why? Because he want to know whether there is a need to involve the experts or not, right? So if you can always get a 3-mark question here, that what are the matters that are to be considered prior to auditor's identification and assessment of risk of material misstatement. Clear? Is it clear? Right? So what we have done so far, we have done the benefits. Then we saw what is the nature of audit planning. So is it a discrete phase of audit? No. Is it a continual and iterative process? Yes. Right? And then we did certain matters that are to be considered prior to auditor's identification and assessment of risk of material misstatement. Right? So now how to learn? I told you that first, before considering as to what procedures to perform, before identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement, by performing this assessment procedure, what will auditor decide? What risk assessment procedures are to be performed? Analytical procedures, then what are those procedures? What are the other risk assessment procedures? Whether expert involvement is required, materiality levels, and general understanding about the legal and regulatory framework. So are you finding it easy to learn also? Quickly send in your replies. So, Abhi, I'm not taking up the definition of risk assessment procedures in detail. It is there in detail in your chapter number 3. And since it is the revisionary session, so I'm assuming that you all are aware about risk assessment procedure, right? And many of you, in fact, all of you have already said that you all are aware, right? Now, quickly tell me who all should be involved in the planning process. Okay, I'll ask you that whether the engagement partner should be involved in planning, audit planning. Quickly send in your yes or no. So Anmol, Ayushi, Abhijit, Om Krishna Om, Swati, all are saying yes, ma'am. Siddharth, all are saying yes. The key engagement team members, like your important, like those who are qualified, let's say senior part members in the team, or those who are qualified chartered accountants. So quickly send in your replies. So yes. So in the audit planning, they should be involved, and whenever whatever has been planned is discussed with the team, engagement partner, the key engagement team partner should be involved so that they can share their experience, their insight, their views about the audit with the entire team. Very simple, right? Now, should the elements of planning be discussed with the management? Like if you are conducting the audit of ABC Limited, should the elements of planning be discussed with the management? So Sukaina is saying no, Shoaib is saying no, Swati is saying yes. Anmol has answered it correctly. Om Krishna Om is saying no. So Anmol has said that can be without affecting audit. Abhijit has also given the same replies. So let me just take you to the module for that. Just a minute. So we are on page number 2.6. So see, discussion of elements of planning with the entities management. Just a minute. So see, the elements of planning can be discussed with the management, but it should not compromise the effectiveness of audit. It should not compromise the effectiveness of audit. Now, what is meant by that? Just a minute. While discussing matters included in overall audit strategy or audit plan, care is required in order not to compromise the effectiveness of audit. See, let's say auditor has to check the way I gave you an example. He has to check the transactions of the sales department. Now, if he does not discuss with the management that on these dates, or let's say this week, I want to check what the transactions from the sales department, I'll be requiring the data. He will not be able to conduct the audit in an effective and efficient manner, right? So elements can be discussed. But what is meant by that? It should not compromise the effectiveness of the audit. So let's take an example. The auditor tells the management of the company that management, on let's say 25th March, I'll be coming for a surprise check of your cash balance. Quickly tell me, will this compromise with the effectiveness of the audit process? Yes or no? So Sukaina is saying yes, Swati is saying yes, Om Krishna Om is saying yes. Right? So I hope you are able to understand. So elements can be discussed, but the same should not compromise with the effectiveness of the audit. You can always get a practical question with respect to this topic. So just have a look at it from the module. So this is on page number 2.6, the last paragraph. The auditor may decide to discuss the elements of planning with the entity's management to facilitate the conduct and management of the audit engagement. Keep in mind the example of sales department ka checking. While discussing matters included in the overall audit strategy or audit plan, care is required in order not to compromise the effectiveness of the audit. Keep in mind the example of what? Your surprise check of cash balance. So very small topics, but and very easy topics, but you can always get what? Any practical situation based on these paragraphs, right? Now, the next topic. So this I have discussed with you, that involvement, who all should be involved in the audit planning, the engagement partner and the key members, to draw their experience and insight, and this is going to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the planning process. Auditor may decide to discuss the elements of planning with the management, but the same should not compromise with the effectiveness of the audit, right? Now, this planning process, it has got two elements, which are what? Preliminary engagement activities and planning activities. And you will see later on that planning activities also, it is divided into two parts, which we will be covering in the later half of this chapter. First of all, let us discuss the preliminary engagement activities. Quickly tell me what is meant by the term preliminary. Preliminary. So Swati is saying before something gets started, and Shoaib is saying initially. So Kaina is saying before, Ayushi is saying first, Pratima is saying primary, absolutely correct. And another word that you may use to define preliminary is preparatory. Preparatory engagement activities. So here it is a stage whereby the auditor as such has not started working on the audit. Abhi he is still deciding as to whether to accept the audit engagement or whether to continue with the audit engagement. See, acceptance is where it is a new client. And whether to continue, let's say it is a tenure of 5 years, right? Or 2 tenures of 5 years. So whether to continue with the existing client. So for considering that, whether it is what? Acceptance of a new client or continuance of work with the existing client, the auditor will consider what? The preliminary engagement activities. As the name suggests, preliminary is what? Preparatory. So here as such, the auditor is deciding what? Whether to accept the engagement or not. See, the engagement is between the client and the audit firm, right? So just be logical now. When the auditor here, he is considering as to whether to accept or continue or not, he will consider certain points with respect to the client. He will consider certain points with respect to the audit firm. And if he finds that these points are okay here and these points are okay here, then he will accept the audit engagement. So you will see that in this topic, we will have certain points relating to the client and we will have certain points relating to the audit firm. Clear? So what are those? So basically, the auditor considers whether the relationship with the client should be continued and whether the ethical requirements, including independence, continue to be complied with. So 3 steps are there. First of all, performing procedures regarding the continuance of client relationship. So this is something relating to client plus the audit firm. Evaluating compliance with ethical requirements, including independence. This is relating to your audit firm. Establishing an understanding of terms of engagement. In order to avoid any confusion, auditor will what? He will send what? An engagement letter. Abhi we'll be doing this in detail. I'm just giving you a brief as to what we are going to discuss. Okay? So logical and easy to understand that since the engagement is between the client and the audit firm, certain points with respect to the client, certain points with respect to the audit firm. And the third point says, see in the first point that we are discussing. So here I told you client and audit firms are related, then audit firms are related. And in order to avoid any confusion, then a letter of engagement. Clear? So now let us discuss the first point, which is performing procedures regarding the continuance of client relationship. So let's take an example that XYZ and Associate is a firm of chartered accountant and ABC Limited is the client. Quickly tell me what comes to your mind when XYZ and Associates, it wants to see whether it can accept the appointment as an auditor of this company. 1 or 2 points, quickly send in your replies. So abhi I'm asking about what? ABC Limited. Independence will be seen with respect to audit firm. ठीक है? Independence as an answer is absolutely correct, but abhi I'm asking for what? ABC Limited. So Anmol, I have asked that when, let's say in our example, XYZ and Associate is a firm of chartered accountants and it wants to see whether to accept the appointment as an auditor of ABC Limited. So with respect to ABC Limited, what the auditor is going to see? So the integrity of the management of the company. See, if the management is not honest, it is not providing correct information to the auditor, whether the auditor will be able to conduct an effective and efficient audit, the answer is no. So the integrity of the principal owner and the key management, principal owner and the key management, right? You will be doing a topic of control environment in your chapter number 3. There we'll be discussing this in detail. Okay? Yes, client ethics. Abhijit has answered it correctly. Okay? So let's say ABC Limited, last year it has committed a fraud of, let's say, 100 crores. And it was in news everywhere. And the principal owner, the board of directors were involved. So now XYZ and associates will see whether to accept the assignment or not. Right? Right? So I'm discussing this A point, performing procedures regarding continuance of the client relationship. So I told you that here auditor is going to consider certain points with respect to client, certain point with respect to the audit firm. Okay? So the auditor, he is going to perform various procedures in order to obtain necessary information about the client organization. And he will make sure that the conclusions so drawn are appropriate. So what are the matters to be considered? The integrity of the principal owner and the key management. Integrity is what? Honesty, right? Then I told you that certain point with respect to audit firm also will be considered. So competence of the engagement team. Let's say the financial statements of the company, they are made as per IFRS. So if the audit firm is having an expertise, the team members are having an expertise of conducting audit of the financial statement which are made as per IFRS, then only it will accept the audit. And whether any matters in the previous audit engagement were there, which also needs to be considered. So let's say this XYZ and Associates, they were the audited last year also. I told you this is with respect to continuance as well as acceptance with the new client. So let's take an example of continuation. Right? So last year, the management of the company did not provide the auditor with a number of data, with a very, let's say, a number of details that were required. So this time, will that finding of the auditor that management doesn't provide the information, will that be relevant? Absolutely, yes. So matters in the current or previous year audit engagement, right? Initial engagement. In case of an initial engagement, you will be studying in your last chapter about ethics. So it is the requirement that in case you are appointed as the auditor for the first time, the auditor needs to communicate with the predecessor auditor. Let's say the predecessor auditor, the earlier auditor, what is predecessor? The earlier auditor. The earlier audit firm has resigned. Then it becomes a duty on the incoming auditor to discuss as to what happened with the predecessor auditor. Clear? Right? Is it clear? So, let me just, whose doubt is this? Sukena? Students, it's not appropriate if you write wrong things on the screen, right? these sessions have been organized for your help. So this is really not acceptable. I don't want any such message now, because the IT team is here and it can always see as to who is the person who is writing all these messages. So what we were discussing, let me just take you through the module. Why? Because Sukaina has asked me to discuss this first paragraph. So IT, please see as to why is this message coming again and again. IT. So preliminary engagement activities, and the first point. So a student has asked me to discuss this. It should be ensured that appropriate procedures regarding the acceptance and continuance of client relationship and audit engagements have been followed, and that conclusions reached in this regard are appropriate. So it basically means that all these procedures which are mentioned in the second and the third paragraph, that is the information about what? About the management's integrity, the information about the competence of the team. So in order to obtain that information, certain procedures are to be performed and then certain conclusions will be drawn. So Sukena, this first paragraph is talking about the next two paragraphs only. So let us just have a look from the module. It should be ensured that appropriate procedures regarding the acceptance and continuance of client relationship and audit engagements have been followed, and that conclusions reached in this regard are appropriate. Right? And what are those procedures? The auditor should obtain information considered necessary in the circumstances before accepting the engagement of a new client or whether to continue with the existing. Now, in order to obtain such information, certain procedures are to be performed. So what are those procedures? Information such as integrity of principal owner and key management, competence of engagement team to perform the audit engagement, and implication of matters that have arisen during current and previous audit. So just go through this in your module, from your module. These three paragraphs. So Sukaina, is your doubt clear? Right. So the audit procedures are to obtain certain information. Where is this information mentioned? It is mentioned in paragraph 2 and 3. And that information can be obtained only by performing certain procedures which are mentioned in paragraph number 1. Is it clear? Right. So let us now just have a look at the, just a minute. Second point. What was the second point? It was evaluating the compliance with ethical requirements, including independence, right? Ethical requirements, including independence, right? So what is meant by independence? You all have done this topic with me in chapter number 1, that the judgment of the person should not be subordinate to the wishes of another person, right? So auditor needs to remain alert throughout the audit process. Alert to what? That independence of the entire team should be maintained. That ethical requirement should be complied with. And how? By observation and inquiries. Inquiries of members within the team. Inquiry of the members within the firm. That he will and in case any matters are there which draws his attention that okay, so and so person is not now independent, right? So in this case, appropriate action should be taken. What can be appropriate action? It depends upon the circumstances of the case. It depends upon the circumstances of the case. So I'll do one thing. I just want a break of 5 minutes here. Just a break of 5 minutes.
निशा जी, हेलो हेलो निशा जी, सारी चैट ना डिसेबल कर दीजिए, ठीक है?
So we were discussing point number B, which is what? Evaluating compliance with ethical requirements, including independence, right? So let us just have a look from at this. Just a minute. See, what are the ethical requirements when the audit firm is conducting any audit? What are the ethical requirements? So it can be integrity on the part of the audit firm is also required, confidentiality, independence. So these are very kind of ethical requirements, and most importantly, independence, right? So there are certain duties for the, just a minute, let me just share my Word file. So there are certain duties for the engagement partner that has been given, that in order to evaluate whether the ethical requirements including independence have been met, the engagement partner, what will he perform? He will obtain relevant information in order to see whether there are threats to independence. Whether there are threats to independence, right? What can be a threat to independence? Let's say XYZ and associate was the audit firm, right? Now, let's say wife of CAY becomes one of the board of directors of the company. Now, there is what? Threat to independence, right? Why? Because CAY now is not independent. He can be influenced of what his wife is saying in the capacity of a board of director. So IT, please do something with these messages. Otherwise, it won't be possible for me to continue.
मैम स्टूडेंट्स आर स्टिल मैम
Sorry.
बच्चे अभी भी मैसेज कर रहे हैं
हाँ, वो आ रहा है ना, स्क्रीन पे रिफ्लेक्ट कर रहा है
निशक जी
ये। रिक्वेस्टिंग रिमोट कंट्रोल ऑफ योर स्क्रीन, एक्सेप्ट और डिक्लाइन। आप कौन बोल रहे हो? मैं आपको फॉरवर्ड करती हूँ मैसेज। किसको? हाँ, मेरे को समझ नहीं आया। आप मेरे को अपना फोन नंबर बताओ, मैं आपको व्हाट्सएप करती हूँ।
मैम मेरे को ही भेज दीजिए आप
अजीत,
हाँ जी
हाँ मैं भेज रही हूँ। ये रिफ्लेक्ट हो रहा है स्क्रीन पर, मैंने आपको भेज दिया अजीत।
मैम
हाँ जी।
मैम एक्चुअली आप अगर वो किसी अलग आईडी से ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं तो फिर उसका कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते हम
तो फिर
एक्चुअली।
जूम प्लेटफॉर्म पे क्लासेस मत लो ना।
नहीं
इफ
मैम
स्टूडेंट्स
एक्चुअली
आर
आप
सो
मैम भैया
मैम उसके अकाउंट को आप ब्लॉक कर सकते हैं। अगर होस्ट कोई है उसको ब्लॉक कर देते हैं देन दे कैन ज्वाइन एनी अदर अकाउंट।
सो IT कैन नॉट ब्लॉक दैट।
नो मैम
आईडी ब्लॉक हो सकता है, होस्ट अगर चाहे तो
मैम
ब्लॉक
अगर
कर
हम
सकता है आईडी
मैम
पूरा
होता है
प्लेटफॉर्म।
बेसिकली
आप
स्टॉप मैम होता क्या है बेसिकली सपोज किसी ने XYZ के नाम से लॉग इन किया उसने कुछ भी चीज की और वो फिर जिसे हमने उसको रिमूव किया देन उस सिस्टम से वो सेम डे पे ज्वाइन नहीं कर सकता बट अदर सिस्टम दे कैन यूज
एक जूम यूजर करके आ रहा है ना, ये कौन है?
वेबसाइट यूजर है,
हाँ,
वेबसाइट यूजर होगा तो मैम वो कभी भी ज्वाइन कर सकते हैं।
तो पर ये तो बहुत प्रॉब्लमैटिक है, ऐसे तो सेशन नहीं हो पाएंगे। चलो मैं कंटिन्यू कर रही हूँ अब, लेट्स सी। अच्छा, आई नॉट रुको। चलो, so we were discussing point number B, whereby we have discussed that the engagement partner, he will have to see whether he has obtained relevant information in order to see whether there are certain threats to independence, right? So I gave you example of what? Wife of CAY. If she joins as a board of directors of the company, then it is a threat to independence, right? And auditor, the engagement partner, he will evaluate information on identified breaches. What is breaches? If there are certain violation. So if there is certain violation which has already been done with respect to the ethical requirements, so the engagement partner is required to evaluate such information and to take appropriate action. So what can be appropriate action? So it will be what? To eliminate the threat. To eliminate the threat, then to reduce. Just so to eliminate the threat, then to take appropriate action. ये IT में लिख नहीं पा रही हूँ, वो मैसेज बार बार रिफ्लेक्ट हो रहा है, दो आई कैन सी कि वो जूम पे नहीं आ रहा है ऑन माई सेकेंड स्क्रीन, पर मेरी स्क्रीन पे वो बार बार आ रहा है तो मैं लिख नहीं पा रही हूँ. So reduce it to an acceptable low level by applying various safeguards. See what can be the safeguards that the audit firm may ask Mrs. Y to resign, right? Then if nothing is possible, to withdraw from the engagement and to promptly report to the firm, to the audit firm, promptly, quickly, that such and such thing is happening, right? Is it clear? Is it clear? Quickly send in your replies.
सर चैट मैम ये क्या बोलते हैं चैट डिसेबल्ड बता रहा
ओके राइट
मैम चैट डिसेबल्ड
हाँ ठीक है IT वैसे you may enable the chat because I am not getting the message in chat. It is reflecting on my screen again and again. So I am unable to write on the screen also. So someone is asking for the
मैम आप रिकनेक्ट कर लीजिए ना.
Sorry?
मैम आप रिकनेक्ट कर लीजिए, लाइक लीव करके फिर से ज्वाइन करेंगे तो हो जाएगा.
ठीक है, I'll do that.
ओके मैम.
Okay. IT, please enable me to share. ठीक है. So I hope students this second point is also clear. Now I told you that in order to avoid any confusion from the point of view of the client as well as from the point of view of the audit team, the auditor will send what? Engagement letter, and that too before the commencement of audit. Why? To avoid any misunderstanding or confusion, right? So the engagement letter, how it appears, that we'll be discussing later on. But when the auditor is conducting what? The preliminary engagement activities. So the first point says whether to accept the appointment or not, or whether to continue the the engagement or not. So there he is obtaining certain information about the client organization and about the audit firm also, that is independence and all. In the second point, auditor is evaluating within the firm with respect to ethical requirements and independence. And in the third point, in order to avoid any confusion, auditor is sending what? An engagement letter, that too before the commencement of the audit engagement, to avoid any misunderstanding or any confusion. So I hope this topic is also clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, the chat are still disabled.
Not an issue.
Actually, this LRC class is to facilitate you all so that you can prepare well and you can get very good results. That is the reason we are having Nancy ma'am with among us. And she is teaching nicely. She is preparing handwritten notes and explaining you very nicely. But at the same time, what we are trying to facilitate you, you're taking, what should I say? You're taking, this is not in right direction. So some of the students, or maybe students or not, they are taking disadvantage and they are misbehaving. That is not at all acceptable. We'll definitely trace out. I'm making complaint. So we'll definitely look into the detail that who is joining and from which IP address we will check, and we will ensure that that person should get some punishment also.
Ma'am, that message
This is the reason that chat was disabled. But now, please, now whoever is joining, please, if you can mention your registration number along with your name, it will help us, because we really want you to be benefited in you improvise in the subject. And for that, we are working day and day night and working hard for you people, for you students. Because at the end, we also want you to perform in the exam and you understand how auditing is being pursued and what is the benefit, what is auditing subject actually. So it will encourage if you prepare notes, you ask technical queries, but if somebody is misbehaving, that is not acceptable and will definitely take some strong action against that person. So students, if it is possible, please join with your registration number along with your name so that we can also have check. Yeah, Nancy ma'am, you want to say something?
Ma'am, nothing but like I'm telling the students only that this is not at all acceptable. And this is one of the cyber crime itself. That someone is, you know.
And we will definitely have audit also for this.
Right, ma'am, right.
Yeah, that is also part of audit now, that whoever is doing it, we can check their IP address, we can trace that person, whoever is doing it will not be safe. Right. So please, better if the classes are meant for you, you please study, you are student and you should take maximum benefit of these classes. Rather, if you will go in another direction, then definitely your career and your future will be spoiled. So that's all I can tell you. And we will definitely take some action against that person, whoever has done this. And I hope it will not repeat. And if it is, we'll definitely take action. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, right, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So students, now we'll be discussing the second part. If you remember, I told you that planning activities, the planning process is divided into two parts. The elements of planning are into two parts. That is what preliminary engagement activities, that is the preparatory stage. And now when the auditor has decided, okay, I'll accept or I'll continue with this client, right? Considering the ethical requirements of the audit firm, considering the integrity of the management, now is what? The planning activities. And as I told you earlier, that planning activities is of now two types. That is establishing the overall audit strategy and developing an audit plan. So first of all, the auditor will be establishing an overall audit strategy. And once an overall audit strategy has been established, he will develop an audit plan. Is it clear? Right. Now, quickly, if you're able to send replies, then it's fine. Otherwise, what is meant by...
Ma'am, we are here only and we are definitely recording and tracking the session.
Ma'am,
okay.
See, I'll just send you now what message I have received.
Now also you have received?
Ma'am, I don't know. What is it? If you want, I can just end up today's session. Just have a look at the message. You can discuss with IT. Though it is not reflecting on the screen that I'm looking on the second device, but it is getting reflected on my screen.
Okay. Got it.
Hannah, so I don't know what
I think we can look at other students and we can continue, but I'm complaining. I'm making its complaint so that they can look into it.
Right, ma'am. Right. Okay. Not a, right. So strategy, overall audit strategy. Once the strategy has been established, then the auditor can make a detailed audit plan, right? Now, what is the work of overall audit strategy, right? So basically, an overall audit strategy, it gives the auditor a direction as to how the audit will proceed. What is the scope? What all areas are to be covered? What is the timing of various reports that are to be generated or various communications that are to be done with the management, right? So auditor will have in his mind as to what is the scope, what is to be checked, how much checking is to be done, the timing, the direction of the audit. If the work has been done, how the same will be reviewed. So it establishes that. And if you just consider that it is establishing the scope. That is, what is the extent of checking? What all will be checked? The timing of the reports or the communication or the direction. Just link it to the resources that the auditor has to use in the audit process. So once the auditor establishes the overall audit strategy, it helps the auditor in determining as to what resources in the form of what? Time and team. What resources are required, how much resources are required, when they are required, right? So if I ask you that how does an overall audit strategy assist the auditor? So it assists the auditor in following ways. So for simplicity, I have mentioned that just to learn that what resources, how much resources, when are these required, and the direction, supervision, and review of such resources. Is it clear? Now let us just read this one by one. So we have seen that in overall audit strategy, it sets the scope. So I told you what extent of checking, the timing, and the direction of the audit, and it guides the development of the more detailed audit plan, right? It assists the auditor to determine the following matters. And students, when we are discussing now that it helps in determining what scope, timing, direction, see, it helps the auditor with respect to the resources only now. When you know that this is the scope, this is to be checked, now what you can decide, how much resources will be required. You are aware that the subsidiaries who are in foreign countries, the import export, that is to be checked. Now you are aware as to what resources according to the competence and capability of the team. What timing, when you are aware about the reporting timings, then again, how much resource you required, how much time or the team you required, and the direction, right? So it assists the auditor for the following matters. So what are those? The resources to deploy for specific audit areas, such as the use of appropriately experienced team members for high risk areas and involvement of experts on complex matters. Just keep in mind that when the auditor is establishing an overall audit strategy, he is able to determine the scope, the extent of checking, what all areas are to be checked, the timing, right? And the direction. So based on that, what you will be able to determine as to what resources, because in the scope you have determined what are the specific audit areas which are high risk, where the experienced team members are required on any complex matter, and the amount of resources to allocate to specific audit areas, such as number of team members assigned to observe the inventory count at material location, the extent of review of others' auditor work in the case of group audits, or the audit budget in hours to allocate to high risk areas. Is it clear? Is it clear? I'm getting that. Just a minute.
Ma'am, chat disabled है.
हाँ, ठीक है. तो I'm assuming that it is clear, right? Then the second one is how much resources. I told you that how much resources. So for example, if inventory count is to be done, then how much resources, what time will be required? How much time needs to be devoted? Then what team will be required? So let's say when the auditor was discussing about the scope, timing, and direction, he got to know that, okay, the inventory that is with the inventory that is there with the client, it is a huge inventory, right? So in that case, the number of team members assigned to observe the inventory, right? Then third, when these resources are to be deployed, such as whether at an interim date or any key cutoff date. So let's say if inventory count is to be done, then you all must be aware, because these are what revisionary classes. Inventory count, the responsibility is that of the management, because it is one of the internal control which is to be implemented by the management. Now, if management conducts the inventory count as on 31st March, then auditor will attend it as on that date only. So whether on key cutoff date or any interim is which is not a complete year, let's say maybe quarterly or half yearly, right? Then last is all such resources, how these will be managed, directed or supervised, such as when team briefing or debriefing meetings are expected to be held. What is meant by briefing and debriefing? I'll tell you that, see, students, when the engagement partner, let's say he is called up a meeting of the entire team and he's discussing and he's giving certain information to the entire team, it is what? Briefing, right? What is debriefing? When whatever information has been given to the team, the engagement partner is asking the team about what they have understood and how much work they have done as per that information. So briefing is when the engagement partner is giving the information, and debriefing is when the engagement partner is asking the team, right? Is it clear? So how such resources are managed, directed, supervised, such as when team briefing, debriefing, meetings are expected to be held, how engagement partner or manager reviews are expected to take place, for example, on-site, off-site, and whether to complete engagement quality control reviews, right? So once the overall audit strategy has been established, it will assist the auditor with respect to what? The resources, taking decisions with respect to resources. What kind of decision? That what kind of resources are required, how much are required, when are they required, and how the direction, supervision, and review of such resources will be done, right? So let me just take you through what topics we have done. Then we will take a break of 10 minutes and then we will restart. So we started our topic with the benefits of planning. So I told you that there are 6 points, that is appropriate attention to important areas, potential problems identified and resolved, organize and manage the engagement in an effective and efficient manner, selection of engagement team members as per the capabilities and competence, direction, supervision of the team along with the review of the work done so far, coordination of the work done by the other, that is the experts. So once the audit planning has been done, it will help the auditor to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level. How? Because it will reduce the risk of any inappropriate opinion. Nature of audit planning, it is not a discrete phase of audit, rather a continual, that is continuous, happening throughout the process of audit and iterative, happening again and again, right? What are the matters to be considered even prior to auditor's identification and assessment of risk of material misstatement? So I told you that risk of material misstatement is identified and assessed by performing risk assessment procedures. And what risk assessment procedures to perform? So that auditor is going to consider, that is the whether analytical procedures. And the last point says what are the other risk assessment procedures. So these are 2 points. Then a general understanding about the legal and regulatory framework, the materiality levels, and whether the expert involvement is required. Will the engagement partner be involved? Yes. Key members? Yes. To draw their experience and insight, and this is going to increase the effectiveness, efficiency of the planning process. Can the auditor discuss the elements of planning with the management? The answer is yes, but it should not compromise with the effectiveness of audit. I gave you example of surprise cash check. If auditor tells the management that we will be coming for the surprise check of cash balance on this date, will it be surprise? No, it will not be, and it will compromise with the effectiveness of the audit. Planning process, the elements of planning are divided into 2 parts, which is what? Preliminary engagement activities and planning activities. So preliminary engagement activities is what? The preparatory stage, whereby auditor is deciding whether the relationship with the client should be continued, or whether the ethical requirements, including independence, these have been complied with. So I told you how to learn. In point number A, The auditor is obtaining certain information with respect to the client and the audit firm. In the point number B, the auditor is obtaining information with respect to the audit firm. And in point number C, the auditor, in order to avoid the confusion, he is sending what the engagement letter. So auditor will make sure that the appropriate procedures are followed, and the conclusions which are drawn out of those procedures, those are what appropriate. He will obtain necessary information about various matters like the integrity of the principal owner and the key management, the competence of engagement team, matters in the current year or the previous year audit engagement, and in case of initial engagement, the communication with the predecessor auditor. Now, with respect to the ethical requirement, he will continuously evaluate compliance, independence. What is meant by independence? Judgment of a person is the judgment of the person is not subordinate to the wishes of the other, right? And just a minute. So he should remain alert. How? Through observation and inquiries within the team. So just a minute, I'm getting a call. I'm just a minute. I'm just holding the So students, this is really very unacceptable. I'm again getting those messages. So this is not at all acceptable on a professional platform, which has been provided for your benefit. I don't know whosoever it is, action will be taken against that person, but this is not at all acceptable. And if such situation continues, I won't be in a position to continue with the class, right? So, Abhi, we are just checking as to who is doing that. I'm sure that person will be caught. And here I'll be discontinuing this class for 15 minutes. If you want these classes for your benefits, It will be better that that action should not be repeated again and again. And this is a message from ICAI Board of Studies as well as from the faculties who are taking these sessions. So here I'm discontinuing this class for 15 minutes. We will have to check as to what is happening. For those who are not doing this thing, please students concentrate on your studies and not on these things. Right? This is really not acceptable out of all of you. So I'll be taking a break. We'll be discontinuing the class for the next 15 minutes.
Technical team, please put a break sign here. Thank you.
Yeah. So we were discussing about the overall audit strategy, right? And I told you that it helps to set the scope, timing, and direction of audit and guides the development of more detailed audit plan. So we have discussed the first part, that is setting of the scope, timing, and direction of audit. And I told you, once the auditor is clear about the scope, the timing, and the direction of audit, it will help him in determining as to what are the resources for an audit team, the time and the team, right? So what resources will be required based on what high risk areas are there, whether involvement of experts on complex matters are required, the appropriate experienced team members that are required, how much. That is, we took an example of inventory valuation. How many auditors work? Let's say it is what? Your joint audit, right? Then audit budget in hours. That is, so out of the total hours that has been devoted for that audit, with respect to specific areas, what time will be devoted? When, that is whether at the interim or the key cutoff dates, and the direction, supervision, and the review, that is the briefing and debriefing. I told you what is meant by briefing and debriefing. Now read this next line, that is, it guides the development of more detailed audit plan. So once the scope, timing, and direction is established, see, it is going to help the auditor in developing the more detailed audit plan. Why? Because now after establishing the overall audit strategy, he is aware as to what is the scope, what is the timing, and what is the direction, in which direction, what is the extent of review, right? So everything he is aware about what kind of resources, how much and when the resources are to be applied. Then the auditor is in a position to develop more detailed audit plan, right? Now, there are various factors that the auditor needs to consider when he is establishing an audit strategy, right? Now, just how to learn and how to understand. See, just keep in mind that auditor is conducting an audit of, let's say, a company. He has to establish the scope, the timing, and the direction of the audit. Now, when he is establishing that, he must be aware about various characteristics of the company. What is the applicable financial reporting framework, right? Then timing. So he must be able to understand as to what are the reportive objective of the engagement, right? Then various factors that are material in the auditor's professional judgment. Abhi, I'm just giving you a brief as to what these 5 points are, and then we will be discussing these points in detail, right? Then various factors that in the auditor's judgment, auditor's professional judgment are significant, and the results of the preliminary engagement activities. If you remember, we have done preliminary engagement activities whereby auditor has considered certain points regarding the client, certain points regarding the audit firm. So what were the results of those preliminary engagement activities? And if auditor has gained any knowledge in the previous audit, that is also going to be considered when the auditor is going to establish what? The scope, timing, and direction of audit. And last but not the least, what resources are required. You all know that once this scope, timing, direction of the audit has been established, it helps the auditor to see as to what resources are required, when they are required, and how much are required. So various factors that are to be considered by auditor for establishing audit strategy. So what is the first point? he will identify the characteristics of the engagement that define its scope. Just student, keep in mind that you are going to conduct the audit of, let's say, ABC company, right? You are establishing the strategy, that is how to proceed with audit, what will be the scope, what will be the timing, and what will be the direction, right? So first of all, what information will you see? You will identify the important characteristics of the engagement, right? Which defines the scope of the audit engagement. So what can be those characteristics? What is the applicable financial reporting framework? Is it the accounting standards? Companies hai to Companies Act, Schedule 3 ka closing requirement. The nature of business, right? Are there any is specialized knowledge also required, right? Then with respect to the industry, the various reporting requirements. So I told you companies ke case mein disclosure requirements as per Schedule 3. Maybe banks ke case mein the various reporting requirements that the banks have to give as per your the regulations of RBI, right? Then the expected use of audit evidence. What use is he going to do with respect to whatever audit evidence is received, right? So here the auditor is what? He's identifying the characteristics of the engagement that defines the scope, that is the applicable financial reporting framework, the nature of business, that is specialized knowledge, industry, that is the reporting requirement, and the expected use of audit evidence, right? Then the reporting objective. Now, if you remember, I told you that overall audit strategy may the auditor establishes the scope, the timing, and the direction of audit. So the timing. So for timing, he will have to see as to what are the reporting objectives of the engagement, when the reporting is to be done, right? So the entity's timetable for reporting. The meetings that are to be done at what time with the management to discuss the nature, timing, extent of audit work with the management. Then discussion with the management regarding the expected type and timing of reports to be issued, including the audit reports. Discussion with the management regarding the expected communications on the status of audit work throughout the engagement, and expected nature and timing of the communication within the team members. So see, once the auditor is aware about the reporting objectives, when the communications with the management has to be done, when the status of the audit work is to be discussed with the management. Let's say management asks the auditor that, okay, within 15 days, you just discuss with me the audit status, the audit work status within the next 15 days. So accordingly, the auditor will decide the scope, timing, and direction of the audit now. And within the team members also, there will be communication. So all those reporting objectives and the communications, that are another factor that the auditor has to consider when he's determining what the scope, timing, and direction of the audit, right? Then there must be various factors which in the auditor's professional judgment are important, significant for directing the engagement team's effort, right? So for example, see, if the auditor is aware that the volume of transaction is very high, right? So he is aware that, okay, with respect to purchases and sale, there are lakhs and lakhs of transaction. So auditor may establish a strategy whereby he intends to rely on the internal control of the organization, because you all know that checking of 100% of transaction is not practically possible. Right? So volume of transaction, and see, this volume of transaction, this factor in the auditor's professional judgment is really very, very significant in directing the engagement team effort, right? Then significant individual transactions, developments. For example, if there are changes in industrial regulations or no new reporting requirement, or let's say if there are changes in the financial reporting framework. AS की जगह now Ind AS, let's say it's applicable. So how, like all these factors are going to decide as to how the scope, timing and direction of the audit will be established. That is how the overall audit strategy will be established. And other developments, like if there are any changes in the legal requirement, let's say there are a client is there which is in the green belts of northeastern states, then if certain environmental department has imposed certain rules or regulations or certain changes are there, all that needs to be considered. See, these in the auditor's professional judgment are important in directing the efforts of the team. Why? Let's say there is a change in the environment rules and regulations of the environmental department. So here the auditor is now going to decide the timing, or let's say the resources, in such a way that much efforts are devoted towards such factors, right? So this was with respect to various factors that in the auditor's professional judgment are significant. And students, you can always get, a direct 3-mark question that what are the factors that the auditor needs to consider, which in his professional judgment are significant in directing the engagement team's effort, right? Then we have done what? As elements of planning activity, that there are certain preliminary engagement activities. There are certain preliminary engagement activities that auditor needs to done. And in case it is a continuing existing client, if this is an existing client, whether the knowledge gained on other engagement performed by the engagement partner for the entity is relevant, right? For example, let's say the auditor has done some other engagement whereby he found that there are a number of related party transactions with respect to this client. Now, this is an important factor in determining the scope, timing, and direction, because a lot of timing will be devoted towards such transactions, right? Towards such high risk transaction whereby significant risk can be there. So it says that results of previous audit that involved evaluation of operating effectiveness of internal control. See, let's say earlier, in the previous year audit, the auditor relied on the internal control of the organization, right? So before relying on the internal control, students, see this is in detail in chapter number 3, but Abhi, what is relevant for this point, I'm discussing that only. So, but before relying on the internal control, auditor must have checked the internal control, though not for the purpose of giving an opinion. This you all are aware, right? So, whether that internal control was operating effectively, and in case of any deficiency, whether the action was taken or not. So let's take an example that last year auditor used internal control when he was taking sales transaction. But then he found that there are certain deficiencies in the internal control. The internal control was not operating effectively. And he found that management did not take any action with respect to that also in order to improve that internal control. Now, just consider whether this point is of relevance this year. Absolutely yes. Why? Because now this is going to impact the scope, timing, direction of how the audit is going to proceed, like overall audit strategy. Because last year there was deficiency in internal control. So now this year auditor may establish an overall audit strategy where he by intends not to rely on the internal control, because deficiency was there, management did not take any action. Clear? And auditor will always ask his team to have a questioning mind. See, when you have a questioning mind, then only you are able to ask the management or the client organization that, okay, this is the document, tell me what is this, tell me why this is not there. Then, as you all know, that professional skepticism. What is professional skepticism? Being of questioning mind. So when the auditor is establishing the scope, timing, direction, he should follow what? Professional skepticism at that moment also. Clear? So far we have discussed what? 4 points, that is, identify the characteristics of the engagement that defines the scope, ascertaining the reporting objectives of engagement, to plan timing of audit and nature of communication required. Then consider factors that in the auditor's professional judgment are significant in directing the engagement team efforts. Fourth, consider results of preliminary engagement activities and whether knowledge gained on other engagement performed by the engagement partner for the entity is relevant, right? We discussed about internal control ka part. And last, ascertaining the nature, timing, extent of resources necessary to perform the engagement. See, resources, I told you. What resources are there? Time and the team. So the competence capability of the team, at what time the same will be required, till what extent, who will be doing what. So ascertaining the nature, timing, and extent of resources. So see, it's mentioned in your module that experienced team members will be required for higher risk of material misstatement areas and budgeting and devotion of more time to the areas that require the where there is higher risk of material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, right? So let us just have a look at it from your module. So various factors that are to be considered by auditor for established audit strategy. So just keep in mind, see, understanding part, I hope it's clear. Now how to learn, right? And in fact, this was a question in last year papers also. I'll be discussing that in the next session. So how to remember? So I told you that when the auditor has to establish the overall audit strategy with respect to particular client engagement, audit engagement. So first of all, though, he will have to understand what are the characteristics of the engagement. Then the reporting objectives. Then any matters which in his professional judgment are significant in directing the engagement team's effort. Then if his understanding of the preliminary engagement activities and the knowledge that he has gained when he was performing other engagements, and last but not the least, ascertaining the nature, timing, extent of resources. After considering all these factors, auditor is going to establish an overall audit strategy with respect to an audit engagement, right? So this is the way the overall audit strategy will be established. Now let us just have a look at this illustration. Before that, just a minute. So yeah, we have covered all these points. Nothing is left so far. Quickly have a look at this illustration number 1. This is on page number 2.13. The auditor T of Hand Fab Limited is worried as to management of key resources to be employed to conduct audit. How the audit strategy would be helpful to the auditor. Quickly have a look at it. Students, if you're not able to send in your replies, not to worry, just be with me and read this question, the question that is there on the screen. So it says that the auditor T of Hand Fab Limited is worried as to management of key resources to be employed to conduct audit. Please, whenever any question comes, read the entire question. How the audit strategy would be helpful to the auditor. So you can see it is talking about management of key resources. And it is asking as to how the audit strategy will be useful to the auditor. So what will be the answer? Whereby we discussed as to what resources, when, how much. Just have a look at this, establishing the overall audit strategy assistant to the auditor. Quickly go through it. I'm waiting for all of you to go through this page number 2.9. So I hope it is clear. See, assistance to the auditor is what? How it helps the auditor. And the question specifically asks that management of resources may how audit strategy helps, right? So I hope it is clear. Now, we were discussing about what? Planning. activities, right? So here you have seen that establishing the overall audit strategy, which we have done. The next part is developing an audit plan. And for developing an audit plan, we will be referring to SA 300. What is the name of SA 300? It is planning and audit of financial statements. Planning and audit of financial statement. So see what we have done so far. We saw that elements of planning may. I'm just giving you a quick recap. Preliminary engagement activities will come and planning activities will come. Preliminary engagement activities may there were 3 activities. Where first may I told you about client plus audit firm. Then it was about audit firm, and then it was the issue. The auditor will send what? Engagement letter, the terms of engagement letter, right? Then with respect to planning activity, there will be what? It is establishing the overall audit strategy and development of audit plan. So development of audit plan is the topic that we'll be covering right now. And establishing the audit strategy, we saw that it helps assist the auditor in determining as to how to manage the resources. Students, in the this PPT which I have uploaded. So let us just have a quick look at this also. So this we have done that nature of audit planning. It is a continuous iterative process. Then these are the elements of planning. See. So preliminary engagement activities, whereby I told you 3 points and how to learn. I've repeated a number of times, so I hope it must be clear. Then planning activities, which is establishing the overall audit strategy and developing the audit plan. Clear? Is it clear? Now, just a minute. Just a minute. Right. So development of an audit plan is our next topic, for which I told you that we will be referring to SA 300, which is planning and audit of financial statements, right? Now, when the auditor is planning an audit of financial statement, the audit plan will have a description of 3 things. The nature, timing, extent. The nature, the timing, and the extent of planned risk assessment procedures. So these are the short form that I have written just for summary purposes. You need to write the full form, like the entire thing, that is risk assessment procedures. Right? So see, when the auditor is developing an audit plan, right? So that should include a description of nature, timing, extent of the risk assessment procedures, nature, timing, extent of planned further audit procedures at the assertion level, and the other planned audit procedures. So basically, the plan will include as to what type of audit procedures will be performed, what will be the timing of such audit procedure, and how much audit procedure, the extent of checking that will be done. Is it clear? Right? So we will be discussing all 3 points in detail, though they are there in detail in your chapter number 3, right? But for the understanding of SA 300, I'll just discuss with you these points. So, see, as per SA 315, which we will be doing in our chapter number 3, identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. This is the name of SA 315. So here, the auditor performs certain audit procedures in order to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement. How? Through understanding the entity and its environment, including the internal control. So if you just remember the name of this essay, maximum of your understanding about this point number 1 is clear. So when the auditor is identifying, assessing the risk of material misstatement, how will he do that? He will understand the entity and its environment, right? So let's say a company is there. When the auditor is obtaining a general understanding about the company, he got to know that the company is importing certain raw material from China, right? Now, when he is understanding the environment, the entity and the environment in which that entity is operating, he came to know that government has banned certain imports from China. Now, this is a risk which is identified and assessed by the auditor when he is performing what? Audit procedure. And since these audit procedure, see what will be these audit procedure? It can be inquiry of the management. It can be observation of, the inspection of the financials, right? So audit procedures will remain the same, but the context in which they are performed. For example, here he performed those procedures to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. So see, if there is a ban on the import from China, let's say this is the only source of raw material for that company, so it can have an impact on the going concern. And auditor finds that the company has not disclosed anything in their financial statement with respect to such matter. So this is what a risk of material misstatement, that the financial statement is not giving a true and fair picture. So when the auditor is performing such audit procedures, what all audit procedures he's going to perform here in order to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement? What will be the nature of those procedure? What will be the timing of those procedure? What will be the extent of those procedure? Auditor is going to mention that in that description of audit plan. And where is it mentioned? It is mentioned in essay 300. So nature, timing, extent of planned. Auditor must have planned such risk assessment procedures. So auditor is going to maintain a description of such nature, timing, extent of planned risk assessment procedure. Is it clear? Now, based on his assessment of risk, which he has done under essay 315, auditor responds to such risk under essay 330. Again, this is there in your chapter number 3. So the auditor responses to assessed risk, and where he has assessed those under essay 315. Now, see, once the auditor identifies and assesses the risk, will he sit idle? Will he not do anything with those risks? He will do. He will respond to those risks. How will he respond? By performing other audit procedures. Again, such audit procedures can be in the form of inquiry, observation, examination, recalculation, anything. But now, since they are performed as a response to risk assessment procedure, they become what? They become further assessment procedures, further audit procedures. So procedures will be same, but the context now differs. So the description of the audit plan will include the nature, the timing, and extent of planned further audit procedure at the assertion level. What is meant by assertion level? See, each and every information that is appearing in the financial statements, each and every information. See, unless and until auditor is sure about each and every information which is there in the financial statement, be it in the balance sheet, in cash flow, fund flow, in notes to accounts, in P&L, auditor cannot give his opinion on the financial statement as a whole, right? So when the auditor is checking all those information. So it will be checked item by item. So I can say at the assertion level. Student, this topic of assertion is in detail in your chapter number 5 in very much detail. So I'll be taking this topic there, but for the understanding of this topic, I hope it is clear, assertion level. Okay? So whatever information is there in the financial statement and various assumptions with respect to information that the auditor takes is what the assertion level. So it basically says that with respect to every item, whatever audit procedures the auditor is going to perform, the nature, the timing, and extent of such planned risk assessment procedures at the assertion level, the auditor is going to record that as a description of the audit plan. So what are two things? First of all, SA 315, whereby auditor is required to perform what? The risk assessment procedures. So the nature, timing, extent of planned risk assessment procedures, right? And as a response to such assessment of what? Risk which he has done in SA 315. SA 330 में auditor responds to those assessed risk, right? How? See, auditor will not talk with those assessed risk. Now, auditor will, again, what will he do? He'll perform audit procedure. But now these procedures will be called what? Further audit procedures. Further audit procedures. Okay? So the audit plan should include these two things. Apart from that, whatever other planned audit procedures, that is whatever other audit procedures the auditor plans to conduct during the course of audit, the auditor is going to have a description of that. See, just try to understand basically what the auditor is keeping a record of. He is making an audit plan. So he's basically writing as to what audit procedures he's going to perform when he's assessing the risk. What will be the timing of such procedures? What and to what extent? Same way, when he is checking at the assertion level, then what will be the nature, timing, extent of such risk? And apart from the above two procedures, if auditor plans to perform any other audit procedure which is not included in list 1 and 2 above, then a description of that also. So where is the requirement given that the auditor is required to maintain a description of all that audit plan? It is given in SA 300, planning and audit of financial statements. Planning and audit of financial statement. As the name suggests, it requires the auditor to plan an audit of financial statement. And what should that plan include? It should include a description of three things. The nature, timing, extent of planned risk assessment procedure, the nature, timing, extent of planned further audit procedure at the assertion level. Now, why this term at the assertion level? I'll discuss this in detail in the next chapter. And the other planned audit procedures. So if you see just 5 lines, but very, very important. See, this point is talking about what? SA 315. This point is talking about what? SA 330. And where does the requirement come? It comes from SA 300, that is planning and audit of financial statement. I hope it is clear. And see, students, once the overall audit strategy has been established, right, then it becomes easier for the auditor. See, when I say that once the overall audit strategy has been established, it means scope has been defined, timings has been defined, and direction of the audit has been defined. See, it becomes so easy for the auditor for the auditor to now develop an audit plan. And we will be discussing another topic in the next session, which is audit program. So you will see that once the audit planning has been done, it becomes easier for the auditor to construct an audit program, right? Right? So I hope this topic is clear. Right. Now the next topic. So students, I know you are not able to send your replies, but nothing to worry. See, I'm asking you a question. Just consider the answer in your mind. when I ask you that what according to you is the relationship between the overall audit strategy and audit plan, just ask yourself what comes to your mind. Are they two separate process? Are they two separate process or are they interrelated? Just answer yourself. So they are interrelated, right? Now just take an example. Suppose the auditor establishes the scope, timing, and direction of audit, right? And based on this, he decides an audit plan. Now, students, just try to understand that if there is a change in, let's say, the scope, timing, direction of audit, will it lead to a change in audit plan? Obviously, yes. Same way, see, when the auditor was planning, he noted down the nature, timing, extent of risk assessment procedures and the nature, timing, extent of your further audit procedure. And I told you that this planning, it is a continuous process. So when the auditor is performing the plan and he finds that there is more risk of material misstatement, and in turn he changes his audit plan, this is then going to have an impact on the overall audit strategy also. So a change in one leads to change in other. For example, see, let's say here the auditor decides that he will rely on the internal control of the organization. This is one of the strategy, right? Accordingly, he develops an audit plan, and when according to the plan, the auditor was performing, let's say, the further audit procedure, he finds that the internal control are not operating effectively. Now, what will this lead to? It will lead to change in the plan, and accordingly, this is going to lead to a change in the overall audit strategy also, because now auditor will not have the strategy of relying on the internal control. Is it clear? So a change in one, see, the establishment of the overall audit strategy and the detailed audit plan are not necessarily discrete. Discrete is what? Separate or sequential processes, but are closely interrelated, since changes in one may result in consequential changes to the other. As a consequence, since there was change in your strategy, there was a change in audit plan, or vice versa. Since there was a change in audit plan, there was a change in what? Audit strategy. I gave you example of internal control. Let's say auditor establish an overall audit strategy that he's going to rely on the internal control. Now, when he was actually executing the audit plan and he was doing the planning side by side, he saw that the internal control is not operating effectively. So he will change his audit plan. Accordingly, the overall audit strategy will also change, right? So let us just have a look at this relationship between audit strategy and audit plan. See, audit strategy. So again, a 3-marker question can always come. Very important. So audit strategy sets the broad overall approach to the audit. I hope it is clear. We have seen scope, timing, direction. Whereas audit planning addresses the various matters identified in the overall audit strategy, right? Audit strategy determines the scope, timing, direction of audit. Audit plan describes how strategy is going to be implemented. Very important line. The audit plan is more detailed than the overall audit strategy. That includes the nature, timing, extent. That includes means the plan. Includes the nature, timing, extent of audit procedure to be performed by engagement team members. Right? Planning for these audit procedure takes place over the course of audit as the audit plan for the engagement develops. Is it clear? Is it clear? So audit strategy sets the overall approach for the audit, that is the scope, timing, direction of audit. But audit plan, it addresses the various matters that have been identified while establishing the overall audit strategy. And audit plan is more detailed than the overall audit strategy, that includes this, that is for the audit plan, includes the nature, timing, extent of audit procedure to be performed by the engagement team members. Once the overall audit strategy has been established, an audit plan can be developed to address the various matters identified in the overall audit strategy, taking into account the need to achieve the audit objective through efficient use of auditors' resources. What is the audit objective? To express an opinion, but it should be effective and efficient, right? And this last paragraph again is very important. You may get this paragraph and you may get explained. The establishment of the overall audit strategy and detailed audit plan are not necessarily discrete. It is not necessary that they are discrete, that is, or sequential process. That is, it is not necessary that after audit strategy plan will come. Because it might happen that because of change in plan, again there will be change in audit strategy. Change in audit strategy will lead to change in audit plan, but are closely interrelated, since changes in one may result in consequential changes to the other. I hope it is clear, students. Now, a very small topic. Just answer yourself. Tell me that establishing the overall audit strategy and the audit plan, it is whose responsibility? It is the management or the auditor? Quickly send in your replies. It is whose responsibility? Is it the management or the auditor? So obviously it is the auditor's responsibility. So you may get a practical situation that so and so is the auditor of so and so company, and the engagement partner, since he has to cover a number of audit, he has asked the manager of ABC Limited to develop an audit plan for the entire audit engagement. So is he correct? So the answer is no. Why? Because it is the auditor's responsibility to establish an overall audit strategy and to develop an audit plan. Is it okay? Yes. As we have already discussed, that auditor may discuss certain elements of planning with the entity's management, but it should be without compromising the effectiveness of audit. Without compromising the effectiveness of audit. So I hope, students, whatever topic we have covered so far are all clear to you. So relating to overall audit strategy and your audit plan, there are 2-3 small topics that I'll try to cover today itself. So, and the questions of your last year paper or otherwise from your module also, and the questions that I will be uploading tomorrow, so that I'll be covering on the session, in the session which is on 9th, right? So tell me, can overall audit strategy and audit plan, can it be revised? So I know you are not able to answer me. So do one thing, just message yourself. Just answer yourself. So can it be updated or changed? So the answer is yes. If there is any unexpected event, any changes in condition, right? Or if any audit evidence is obtained. For example, I told you that earlier auditor decided to rely on internal control of the organization. Now there is a change in his understanding about the internal control, because after checking the internal control, he found that the internal controls are not operating effectively. So here there will be what? Change in the overall audit strategy and the audit plan, right? Now, with respect to this topic, just take this topic with respect to documentation. So auditor shall document, see, overall audit strategy also auditor is going to document, the audit plan also, any significant changes along with the reasons for such changes, the auditor is going to document all that. Simple, eh? Is it simple? Yes. So overall audit strategy, the audit plan, any significant changes, and what are the reasons. So how will he write that? While checking the internal control, he found that they are not actually operating effectively. So he changed his audit plan. Earlier, he planned to check only, let's say, 10 transactions. For simplicity, I'm taking this example. But now he has decided to check, let's say, 100 transactions. So this is what change in audit plan. Now, accordingly, the overall audit strategy has changed. How? Because now he intends not to rely on internal control. So he has to document all these things also. Okay? Now, see, whenever any work is done, see, let's say XYZ and associates are a form of chartered accountants. CAX is the engagement partner, and in his team, there are, let's say, 4 article clerks. Right? Now, the work of all these article assistants, it will be reviewed. There will be supervision, right? So the next topic is with respect to planning of the supervision, review of the work of engagement team members. See, any work the engagement partner has to do, it needs to be planned. Be it related to supervision, review of the work of the engagement team members. So it is what? Planning, supervision, review of work of engagement team members, right? So auditor shall plan the nature, timing, extent of direction, supervision and review. And it depends upon various factors. To what extent is he going to check the work? Is he going to review the work of the engagement team members? Now this is the next topic. Let us do this topic from your module, so that you become familiar with the module also. So after discussing this topic now, if time will permit, I'll discuss these 2 questions. See, so the extent of, I am on page number 2.17. So the extent of direction and supervision of engagement team members, the review of their work vary depending upon many factors. See, size and complexity of the entity. If the nature of the transactions of the entity is such that there are a number of complex transactions, let's say during the year mergers acquisitions were there, or there are number of export transactions. So if in the auditor's professional judgment, the size and complexity, it is a huge organization, the transactions are complex, there will be a need to review and supervise the work of engagement team member, like more and more review and more direction to them will be required, right? The area of audit. What is the area of audit that has been done? The assessed risk of material misstatement. See, if the risk of material misstatement, which is identified and assessed under SA 315, if it is higher, then auditor is going to, the extent of direction and supervision of the engagement team members, this is going to be more. And last but not the least, the capabilities and competence of the individual team members performing the audit work. Is it clear? Simple topic. So documentation we have done, right? So let's read this question. Test your understanding 3. Quickly just go through this. So go through this test your understanding 3, and this is on page number, let me just tell you, 2.18. So CA Mary, while planning audit of a company, feels that she would inquire from in-house legal counsel of the company status of pending litigation matters against the company to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement. Considering above description, are you able to identify said procedures? Where these identified procedures are included in planning in accordance with SA 300. So the topic that we did, SA 300, SA 315 and 330, go through again, read this question and then we will discuss. So, CA Mary, while planning audit of a company, feels that she would inquire from in-house legal counsel of the company status of pending litigation matters against the company to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement. Considering above description, are you able to identify the said procedures? So these are what see, it is specifically mentioned, identify and assess the risk of material misstatement, right? Where these identified procedures are included in planning in accordance with SA 300. So let us just have a look at the answer. So today I am not able to see your answers, so we will go directly to the answer. So it says that these are planned risk assessment procedures. See, it was mentioned in the question to identify and assess risk of material misstatement. If you remember, students, I told you that the procedure will remain same. In fact, in the next session, we'll be doing about, in the next chapters, we will be discussing about various kind of audit procedures that the auditor can perform. So these are like inquiry, observation, recalculation, reperformance. So student, the procedure is going to remain the same, but the context in which it is used. So here it is, the procedure is used. He's saying that he will inquire the in-house legal counsel. Why? To identify and assess the risk of material misstatement. So when he's identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement, it is what? It is a planned risk assessment procedures. And where is it asked for? It is asked for such planned risk assessment procedure are included in audit plan in accordance with SA 300. Is it clear? Clear? Now, test your understanding fourth, which is the last question for today, and then we will end the session. So the fourth one. I am on page number 2.18. So CA Shubhendu is statutory auditor of a social media company. Due to change in information technology regulations by government, it has become mandatory for such companies to constitute grievance redressal mechanism for users of social media platform of the company. Failure to comply with regulations can potentially lead to civil and criminal liabilities against the company. Is above factor to be considered by auditor while framing audit strategy? Read this question, then we will go to the answer. So, due to change in information technology regulations by the government. So there is a change in legal and regulatory framework. It has become mandatory for such companies to constitute grievance redressal mechanism. So there is a change in the legal regulatory environment, right? So where have you studied? You have studied this point when we were discussing about factors to be considered when establishing the overall audit strategy, right? So what is the answer? Let us just have a look. So is this matter necessary for establishing overall audit strategy? Answer is yes. So changes, I am on page number 2.33. Changes in laws and regulations affecting the company is a factor to be considered while establishing overall audit strategy. There has been change in information technology regulations applicable to the company. Non-compliance of the same can have implications in form of civil and criminal liability. See, from where has all this come? This is coming from your question itself. Such an important matter concerning changes in laws and regulation is to be considered by auditor while establishing the overall audit strategy. So I can see Anmol has written that yes, ma'am, it should be considered in the audit strategy. So I hope it is clear. So where is this point? Let me just show you this particular point in the overall audit strategy topic. So see this C point on page number 2.11. While establishing, auditor needs to consider the following factors. So C point says, consider the factors that in the auditor's professional judgment are significant in directing the engagement team effort and significant other significant relevant developments such as changes in the legal environment affecting the entity. So I hope students, whatever topic we have covered, and we have discussed 2 test your understanding today, that is third and fourth. I'll do one thing, go through this second test of understanding also, this. Then I'll end the session. CA Karthik, this is on page number 2.15. CA Karthik is planning for audit of a company engaged in manufacturing of cosmetics. Considering nature of operations of the company, he had planned to include testing of controls of the company over purchases, sales, and inventories. One fine day, he reaches the corporate office and asks for manual and required documentation to ensure surprise element in testing. He had never shared with management his intention to carry out above procedure. Is approach of CA Karthik proper? Quickly go through this question. I'll wait for you for 30 seconds and then we'll proceed on with discussing the answer. So Anmol has answered it correctly that yes, ma'am, it is proper. So see, CA Karthik is planning. Abhi he is planning. Considering the nature of company, he has planned to include the testing of controls, that is internal control of the company over purchases, sales, and inventories. One fine day, he reaches the office and asks for manual to ensure surprise element in testing. He had never shared with management his intention to carry out above procedures. Is the approach of CA Karthik proper? The answer is no. Why? Because see, we have seen that auditor can discuss the elements of planning with the management, but the same should not undermine the should not compromise with the effectiveness of audit. Now here he is going to check what internal control, right? So this has nothing to do with the effectiveness of control, effectiveness of audit, right? So that is why he should have discussed. So if in case he would have discussed, it would have facilitated him in checking the internal controls. So let us just have a look at the answer. So it is on page number 2.32. So this was the second. So second answer, in the case, CA Karthik has reached office without sharing with management his intention to test the control. The auditor may decide to discuss elements of planning with the entity's management to facilitate the conduct and management of audit engagement without compromising effectiveness of audit. Sharing details of visit to test control does not compromise effectiveness of audit. It is for better facilitation and conduct of audit. Therefore, approach of CA Karthik is not proper. So I hope you are getting the point as to how from any line in the module you can always get a practical situation and then you will have to answer, right? So I've received a reply of Anmol, which is absolutely correct. So students, I hope that whatever we have done, and in the module, I'll just tell you as to what till where we have done. So we have covered till page number 2.18 till test your understanding test your understanding 4, right? So I hope it is all clear to you. And I have also uploaded the notes, and before the next session for chapter number 2, I would upload all the questions that we are going to discuss in the next session. But as I always tell you that before coming for the session, please go through the module till where we have covered in entirety, including the test your understanding questions, including the examples. I'm sure that if you read immediately after the session, that is going to help you in understanding part. I hope it is clear here. Remembering and learning also will become easy if you give a read to this module after the session itself. Right? So here I'll end the session. Thank you for being patient listeners, and see you on session on 9th October. Thank you.